Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. The night sky over Central Park glittered with stars, an unusually clear view for the city dwellers. At the public stargazing event, telescopes were pointed upwards, capturing celestial wonders. Jake, a young astronomer passionate about educating the public, adjusted the focus on his telescope, ready to share the beauty of the cosmos. Right through this lens, Jake explained to a small crowd, you're looking at Jupiter and its moons. It's like a miniature solar system, each moon with its own unique story. Among the crowd, a figure stood slightly apart, her eyes not on the skies but on the enthusiastic man who spoke with such fervor. She was Commander Ziliara, though here on Earth she went by Leah, a name easier on human tongues. Her mission was reconnaissance before invasion, yet she found herself curiously drawn to the human's excitement and the way he made the stars seem accessible to anyone. As the group dispersed to try other telescopes, Leah approached Jake. That was fascinating, she said, her accent unplaceable but intriguing. Could you show me again? I'm quite new to all this. Jake, always eager to share his passion, nodded. Of course. Astronomy's the best when you've got someone as interested as you to talk about it with. He led her back to his telescope. Had you ever looked through one before? No, this is my first time, Leah admitted, gazing into the telescope. The sight of Jupiter's swirling storms and moons was breathtaking, far different from the sterile images sent back by her own kind's probes. You are a natural at this, Jake remarked, watching her navigate the telescope after just a brief explanation. What brings you to an astronomy event in the middle of New York? I'm here for work, Leah replied, carefully skirting the truth. I travel a lot, but the stars look different here. More alive somehow. Jake laughed, a warm, infectious sound. They do have a special shine tonight. Maybe it's the company, or maybe it's just a good night for Jupiter to show off. Leah smiled, human expression still new to her. Maybe I could learn more. Would you be willing to teach me? Absolutely, Jake enthused. How about a tour of the night sky? There's plenty to see, and I'd be glad to explain as much as you want to learn. The next few hours passed with Jake pointing out constellations, explaining the lore behind them, and discussing the science of stars. Leah found herself genuinely interested, her mission momentarily forgotten in the flood of new information. At one point, as Jake aligned a telescope to view Mars, he glanced at Leah. You know, most people aren't this into stars on their first go. It's refreshing to meet someone who shares the same enthusiasm. What's the best thing you've seen tonight? Without hesitation, Leah responded, the moons of Jupiter, but this, she paused, her gaze meeting his as she gestured to the sky. This is all quite beautiful. Jake grinned. I'm glad you think so. Hey, if you're not in a rush, maybe we could grab a coffee? There's a lot more about space I can share, and I'd love to hear about your travels and what stars look like from other parts of the world. Leah considered his invitation. Accepting it could provide more insight into humanity, beneficial for her mission. I like that, she said. As they walked toward a nearby cafe, the city lights faded against the brilliance of the cosmos above. For a moment, Leah saw Earth not as a target, but as a place with its own stories, its own beauty. And as they talked, the alien commander found herself more captivated by the human beside her than the planet she was meant to conquer. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of rain-soaked streets as Jake and Leah found a cozy corner in a dimly lit cafe. Outside, the city was quieting down, but inside, their conversation was just picking up. So, you've never really looked at the stars before tonight? Jake asked, handing Leah a steaming cup of coffee. He had chosen something mild for her, guessing that she might not be accustomed to the strong flavors. Leah nodded, wrapping her hands around a warm cup. Where I'm from, we have studies, of course, but I've never taken the time to observe them like this. It's different when you see them directly, not just on screens or in books. That's the beauty of astronomy, Jake said with a smile. It connects you directly with the universe. There's nothing quite like seeing it with your own eyes. Leah sipped her coffee, finding the bitter taste strangely comforting. What made you want to become an astronomer? She asked, genuinely curious about what drove a human to spend nights staring up at the sky. Jake leaned back, his eyes reflecting a spark of nostalgia. My grandfather was an astronomer. Some of my best memories are of him showing me the stars, teaching me their names. He always said that understanding the stars was like understanding the history of the universe. That's a beautiful thought, Leah remarked, her voice soft. Do you ever think about other civilizations out there when you look up? All the time, Jake confessed. It's hard not to imagine who or what might be looking back at us from a distant world. Do you think about that too? Liao paused, considering how much to reveal. Sometimes, she said finally. It's a big universe. It would be arrogant to think we're the only ones in it. Their conversation drifted from personal stories to theoretical discussions about alien life, each sharing thoughts and laughing over the more bizarre theories. As the night deepened, Jake proposed an idea. How about tomorrow we take a little tour around the city? There's a lot you can learn about Earth just by observing everyday life here. And I'd like to show you some of my favorite spots. Lia agreed, intrigued by the prospect of learning more about human behaviors and their environment. I like that. It's not often I get to explore a place with someone so knowledgeable. Great. Jake's enthusiasm was evident. The next morning, they met up early, just as the city began to stir awake. Their first stop was the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As they walked through halls adorned with artifacts from various epochs of human history, Jake pointed out pieces that depicted astronomical phenomena. Humans have been recording stars for centuries, he explained, stopping before a medieval astrolabe. They used these to navigate the seas, using the stars as guides. Liao was fascinated. Your history is so intertwined with the stars. It's much like my people, though I suppose every civilization has its eyes on the heavens at some point. They continued through the museum, each exhibit prompting discussions about Earth's cultures and comparisons to her own faraway home. As they left the museum, Jake suggested a stroll through Central Park. The park was vibrant with the colors of early fall, and they walked along paths flanked by golden-leaved trees. Liao watched families and joggers, children playing and couples meandering. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the life she knew as a commander. Seeing all this, Liao said, gesturing broadly at the scene around them, it's hard to imagine ever wanting to disturb such tranquility. Jake looked at her, sensing there was more behind her words than mere observation. Is that what you expected to find here? Not exactly, Liao admitted. I expected something less harmonious. Well, Earth has its problems too, Jake said, but there's a lot of good here. A lot worth preserving. As the day ended, Liao felt a growing conflict within her. The mission that brought her to Earth was becoming more complicated with each passing moment. And as she looked at Jake, who was showing her his world with open arms, she began to question her role in the grand scheme of her people's plans. After their insightful day exploring New York's cultural treasures, Jake and Liao found themselves back at Jake's apartment, a modest but cozy place filled with books and astronomical instruments. The night was clear, perfect for another lesson in stargazing, this time from his private balcony. I've got a small setup here, Jake said, unveiling a portable telescope he kept for home observations. It's not as powerful as the ones at the observatory, but it does the job for a city view. Liao watched him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity as he expertly adjusted the telescope. The city lights were dim here, making it possible to catch glimpses of the brighter stars and planets. Here, Jake said, stepping aside, take a look. Peering through the telescope, Liao saw the rings of Saturn, crisp and majestic against the blackness of space. She felt a thrill every time she observed such phenomena directly, a thrill that, she noted, was becoming increasingly mixed with the warmth of human connection. It's beautiful, she murmured. Saturn never fails to impress, Jake replied, watching her reaction. You know, there's something special about sharing this with someone. It's like seeing it anew through their eyes. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the vastness of space seemed to swirl around them, drawing them closer. The night air was cool, but Liao felt a warmth radiating between them. Jake, she began hesitantly. There's something I need to tell you. Wait, Jake interjected gently, sensing her unease. Before you say anything serious, I want you to know something too. These past days with you, showing you the stars, the city, it's been really special to me. I don't know what you're about to say, but I hope it doesn't change this, whatever this is. Liao paused, touched by his sincerity. I hope so too, she said softly. Deciding to hold back her true identity a bit longer, she instead moved closer. Tonight, let's just not worry about anything else. Jake seemed relieved, perhaps preferring to delay potential complications himself. I like that idea. The atmosphere between them shifted, charged with a new, palpable energy. Jake took a step closer, reducing the space between them to mere inches. His hand reached up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle but electric. Leah's breath caught in her throat. She'd been trained to control her emotions, to maintain her composure in any situation, but this was unlike any battle or negotiation she'd faced. This was more intimate, more disarming. "Can I kiss you?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," she whispered back, and when their lips met, it was as if a star had burst to life between them. The kiss deepened, each of them exploring, discovering, and responding to the other's movements. Jake's hands were respectful yet confident, and Leah found herself responding with a surprising eagerness. They moved inside, their hands entwined, not breaking the kiss as they navigated through the darkened room to the living area. Gently, Jake eased back, looking into Leah's eyes. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice full of concern and desire. "I've never been more sure of anything," Leah assured him, pulling him back into an embrace. Their night unfolded with a passion guided by the tender exploration of new territory, both physical and emotional. As they finally lay together, the city sounds a distant murmur. Jake spoke softly. "Tell me about the stars from where you come from," he said, his voice a soothing rumble against her ear. "They're not so different from yours," Leah replied, her voice tinged with melancholy and wonder. "But tonight, I think I've seen the most beautiful ones right here." As sleep claimed them, Leah's last conscious thought was a surprising acknowledgement of her deepening bond with Jake. Her mission, her very purpose on Earth, felt increasingly distant, overshadowed by the human connection she found in Jake's arms. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Jake's apartment, casting lines across the bed where Jake and Leah lay entwined. The peaceful silence of the dawn was stark contrast to the intensity of the night before. Jake was the first to stir, his mind racing as he replayed the previous evening's revelations and intimacy. Leah sensed his movement and woke, her eyes meeting his with a mix of emotions. "Good morning," she said quietly, the weight of their situation hanging between them. "Morning," Jake replied, his voice soft. He propped himself on one elbow, looking down at her. "Last night was incredible. But I feel like there's a lot we still need to talk about." Leah nodded, sitting up and clutching the sheet to her chest. The reality of her dual existence, alien commander and woman falling for a human, suddenly felt overwhelming. "You're right. There's a lot I haven't told you." Jake reached out, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "Whatever it is, we can work through it. I want to understand." Taking a deep breath, Leah decided to trust him with a part of her truth. "I'm not just here as a tourist, Jake. I'm here on a mission. It's nothing nefarious, but it's also not straightforward. I'm here to observe, to learn about humanity." Jake's expression shifted slightly, a frown creasing his brow as he processed her words. "Observe? Like an anthropologist or something more?" "Something like that," Leah said, choosing her words carefully. She wasn't ready to reveal her full identity yet. "I'm here to determine if Earth can coexist with my people." Understanding dawned on Jake, and he sat back, his mind racing with the implications. "So, this is a job for you? Are we just part of your research?" Leah's heart ached at his words, her affection for him clashing with her duties. "At first, it was just a mission. But meeting you, everything we've shared, it's become more than that. You've become more than that." Jake looked away, struggling with a cocktail of emotions, betrayal, fascination, and an undeniable connection to Leah. After a moment of silence, he turned back to her. "I need some time to think about all this. Maybe we should take a break today. I'll go into work, and we can meet up later." Leah nodded, understanding his need for space. "Of course. I'll be here when you're ready." The day passed slowly for both of them. Jake, at the observatory, found himself distracted, his observations of the cosmos tinged with his personal turmoil. Leah, alone in the apartment, wrestled with her conscience and her growing feelings for Jake. That evening, Jake returned, his demeanor more composed but still cautious. "I've been thinking a lot today," he started as he sat down beside her. "About us, about your mission. I don't want to stop seeing you, Leah. But if we're going to make this work, I need honesty. All of it." Leah took his hands in hers, feeling the solidity of his grip grounding her. "I want that too. And I'll tell you everything. Just let's do it together. Let's learn from each other, help each other understand our worlds." Jake nodded, the decision seeming to lift a weight off his shoulders. "Let's do that. Maybe we can start by you showing me more about your culture, your technology. And I can show you more about Earth, not just the stars." "Deal," Leah agreed, relieved and determined. "And Jake, thank you for giving us this chance." Their conversation that evening delved deeper into their backgrounds, each revelation bringing them closer, building a bridge of understanding and respect. They decided to spend the next day at the museum again, this time with Leah sharing insights from her world in whispered tones, making comparisons and discussing potential futures. As they prepared for bed, their earlier conflict seemed a distant memory, replaced by a mutual commitment to navigate the complexities of their interstellar relationship together. The next morning, Jake and Leah left the apartment hand in hand, the city bustling around them as they made their way to the museum. Today's agenda was different. Leah would be the guide, sharing as much as she safely could about her culture and the technology of her world. The museum's space exhibit, with its models of rockets and satellites, provided a perfect backdrop. As they walked through the exhibit, Leah pointed to a model of a satellite. Our technology is somewhat similar, but we've developed propulsion systems that are more efficient and less harmful to our environment. We harness energy from quantum fields, which is something I think Earth is just beginning to explore. Jake, fascinated, leaned in. Quantum fields. We're only scratching the surface of that. How does it work for propulsion? Leah smiled, appreciating his genuine curiosity. It's a bit complex, but essentially we manipulate the fields to create propulsion forces. This reduces the need for fuel and eliminates waste products. Maybe one day I could show you some schematics, help Earth advance a bit faster. I'd like that, Jake replied, his mind racing with the possibilities of such an exchange. They continued to discuss the technical aspects, Leah careful not to reveal too much, yet eager to share her knowledge. As they moved to a section of the museum dedicated to the solar system, Jake asked a more personal question. So, what about your people? Were they like? Leah paused, looking at a model of the Earth from space. We're not so different from humans in many ways. We have families, we strive for better lives, we even have conflicts and resolutions. But our society is more unified in purpose. We don't have as many divisions among our people. That sounds ideal, Jake mused. Though I guess it comes with its own challenges. It does, Leah agreed. Sometimes it means personal desires are set aside for the greater good. Like me being here, away from home. Their conversation deepened Jake's understanding of Leah's conflicts and her world. It was one thing to know she was from another planet, another to grasp what that meant on a personal level. They stopped in front of a digital display, showing the night sky as seen from different parts of the Earth. Leah pointed to the constellation Orion, a familiar sight in both their skies. Back home, that constellation is associated with a legend, much like your Orion the Hunter, she shared, a note of nostalgia in her voice. Jake listened intently as she recounted the tale, a story of lost love and eternal watchfulness among the stars. It reminded him of Earth's own myths and legends, how humanity looked to the stars for stories and meaning. Your stories aren't so different from ours, Jake said. It makes you wonder about the universal truths that might exist, binding us all together. As they left the museum, the air between them was filled with a new layer of intimacy and understanding. They decided to walk through a nearby park, enjoying the rare quiet moment in the bustling city. Jake stopped, taking Leah's hands in his. I know this hasn't been easy for you, being so far from home and having to keep so much hidden. But I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. Leah squeezed his hands, moved by his support. Thank you, Jake. Being with you, I feel less divided between my duties and my desires. As they walked back to Jake's apartment, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the bond they had forged in sharing their worlds remained strong. They were building a relationship that was not just about romantic connection, but also about bridging two vastly different cultures. Back at the apartment, they ended the day with a quiet dinner, exchanging ideas about the future and the role they could each play in fostering understanding and cooperation between their peoples. That night, as they lay together, the earlier tensions seemed distant, replaced by a shared commitment to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The morning sun crept through the blinds of Jake's apartment, casting a warm glow across the room where Jake and Leah were deep in discussion over breakfast. So, what's next for us? Jake asked, spreading jam on his toast. I mean, with everything that's going on, your mission. Leah sipped her coffee, her mind racing through the possible scenarios. I've been thinking a lot about that. I could defy my orders, stay here with you, but the consequences. Jake reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I don't want you to risk everything just for me. But isn't there a way to argue for Earth? To show your people that we're worth collaborating with, not just observing? It's not common, but it's possible. I could request a dialogue, present what I've learned here about humanity. Leah's voice held a note of hope, mingled with apprehension. That sounds promising, Jake said encouragingly. I could help put together information, data, anything that would help your case. Their plan began to take shape as they spent the morning pooling their knowledge. Jake pulled up articles, scientific papers, and documentaries on human achievements and the potential for peaceful interstellar relations. Leah compiled notes on human culture, emotion, and personal anecdotes from their time together. By afternoon, they had assembled a comprehensive presentation. Leah looked over their work, a mix of human and alien perspectives. This could actually work, Jake. Let's hope so, Jake replied, his tone optimistic. They decided to take a walk to clear their heads and talk through their next steps. As they strolled through a nearby park, Leah's communicator buzzed discreetly. She glanced at it, her face falling. It's a summon back to the ship. They're asking why my reports have stopped. Jake looked at her, concern etching his features. What are you going to do? Leah paused, her decision heavy on her heart. I think it's time I go back and face them. With everything we've prepared, maybe I can convince them. I'll come with you, Jake said instantly, his decision firm. You shouldn't face this alone. No, Jake, it's too risky. If they see you, it might make things worse. I need to do this alone. Leah's voice was resolute, even as her heart ached at the thought of leaving him. Jake understood her concern, but insisted on being part of the process. Then let me help prepare you. Whatever you need to say or do, let's rehearse it. I want you to go in there with the best chance possible. Grateful for his support, Leah agreed, and they spent the next few hours role-playing scenarios she might encounter with her superiors. Jake played the part of various council members, challenging her with tough questions and objections she might face. As the day turned to evening, and they prepared for her departure, the weight of the moment settled over them. They shared a quiet dinner, speaking little but communicating much through looks and touches. After dinner, Jake walked Leah to the transporter location, a secluded area where her ship would pick her up. Remember everything we talked about, Jake said as he held her close, trying to memorize her every feature. I will, Leah promised, her voice thick with emotion. And whatever happens, I want you to know. Jake cut her off, placing a gentle finger on her lips. I know. I feel the same. Just come back to me. With a final embrace, Leah stepped back, activating her communicator. A beam of light enveloped her, and she vanished, leaving Jake alone in the quiet park. As he walked back to his apartment, Jake felt a mix of hope and fear. He believed in Leah and what they had built together. Now, all he could do was wait, hope that she could bridge two worlds that seemed so far apart. Jake paced his apartment, each step echoing his mounting concern. It had been days since Leah's departure, and the silence from her end was deafening. He tried to distract himself with work, with the stars, but every shimmer in the sky reminded him of her. The sound of his communicator beeping jolted him from his thoughts. He rushed to answer, hoping for news, but it was his colleague, Dr. Ellen Shaw, checking in. Jake, you've been off the radar. Everything okay? Ellen's voice was laced with worry. Yeah, just waiting on some personal stuff to resolve, Jake replied, trying to sound casual. If you need to talk, I'm here. Remember, no man is an island, Ellen offered kindly. Thanks, Ellen. I might take you up on that soon, Jake said, ending the call. That night, as Jake observed the stars from his balcony, his communicator beeped again. This time, it was Leah. Relief washed over him as he answered. Jake, I'm okay. Leah's voice came through, a mix of exhaustion and relief evident. What happened? Are you still on the ship? Jake asked, his voice tense. Yes, I'm still here. It's been intense. I presented our case, everything we prepared. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of resistance. But Jake, there are some who are listening, who believe in what I've shared, Leah explained. Jake leaned against the railing, the night suddenly feeling colder. So what does this mean? For us, for Earth? There's going to be another meeting, a final decision. They're considering a diplomatic mission, a chance to study Earth more openly instead of from the shadows, Leah said, hope threading through her words. That's incredible, Leah. But what about you? What happens to you after this? Jake's voice was tinged with concern. I don't know yet. I've pushed hard for this, and there are consequences for defying the initial orders. But whatever happens, I needed to do this for us, for what we believe in, Leah responded, her voice steady but tired. Jake felt a pang of worry. I wish I could be there, help you somehow. You've done so much already, Jake. Just knowing you're there supporting me, it means everything, Leah assured him. They talked until the early hours of the morning, sharing fears and hopes. When they finally said good night, Jake felt a mixture of dread and hope. Days later, Leah returned, her arrival unannounced. Jake opened his door to find her standing there, weary but smiling. Leah, what happened? Jake exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. The council has agreed to the diplomatic mission. They want to learn to understand Earth better. And they've assigned me to lead the mission due to my experience here. Leah explained, her eyes shining with a mixture of victory and relief. And the consequences? Jake asked, pulling back to look at her. I've been relieved of my command position, but they've allowed me to stay on Earth to work with you, with humanity. It's a new beginning, Jake, Leah said, her hand finding his. Jake laughed, relief flooding through him. That's more than I dared hope for. They spent the day catching up, planning for the future. As evening fell, they returned to Jake's balcony, where they first looked at the stars together. As one chapter ends, another begins. Here's to new beginnings, Jake toasted, raising an imaginary glass. Leah nodded, leaning against him. To new beginnings, and to a universe that seems a little smaller tonight. Together, they watched the stars, their future unfolding before them, filled with possibilities and challenges, but most importantly, filled with hope for a united path forward. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the city as Jake and Leah walked along the Riverside Park, a favorite spot that had become their sanctuary during the tumultuous times. Today, the air held a fresh promise, one that spoke of new beginnings and peaceful coexistences. Leah, visibly more relaxed than she had been in weeks, turned to Jake with a smile. I never thought I'd see the day when my people would openly engage with humans. It's going to be a huge step forward. Jake nodded, his hand finding hers as they walked. It's incredible, really. And to think it started with us here on this little planet, Leah chuckled. It does put things into perspective, doesn't it? We're not just a small part of the universe, but a pivotal one. As they reached their favorite bench overlooking the river, Jake pulled out a small, wrapped package and handed it to Leah. I got you something, a sort of celebration gift. Curious, Leah unwrapped the package to find a beautifully crafted model of the solar system, complete with a little plaque that read, "To Leah, who taught us to look beyond the stars." Leah was touched, her eyes misting over. Jake, it's beautiful. Thank you. I'll treasure this always. They sat down, watching a family of ducks paddle by. The scene was peaceful, a stark contrast to the cosmic discussions and decisions that had filled their recent days. So, what's next for us? Jake asked, his tone reflective. With your new role and everything, Leah sighed, a contented sound. Well, I'll be busy setting up the mission, liaising between our peoples. But I want to make sure we don't lose this. She squeezed his hand. Us? Jake smiled, his gaze warm. We won't. We'll make it work. Maybe you can teach at the university, give lectures on interstellar relations? I'd like that, Leah agreed. And you can continue your research, maybe even work with some of our technology. It'd be a real exchange of knowledge. Their talk turned to plans, both grand and mundane, from public speeches and university lectures to quiet dinners and nights spent stargazing. They were in the middle of planning a lecture series when Leah's communicator beeped softly. She checked it, a smile spreading across her face. It's from the council. They've officially approved the mission charter. It's happening, Jake. It's really happening. Jake, elated, pulled Leah into an embrace. You did it, Leah. You changed the course of history, and I couldn't have done it without you, Leah whispered back. As they released each other, Jake looked thoughtful. There's something else I've been meaning to ask you. What's that? Leah inquired, curious. How do you feel about making Earth your permanent home? Not just for the mission, but for life? Jake asked, his voice tinged with hope. Leah didn't hesitate. I thought you'd never ask. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. They spent the rest of the morning talking about the future, dreaming up possibilities not just for themselves, but for their combined worlds. It was a hopeful time, a period of incredible potential and promise for integration and unity. As the chapter of Leah's covert mission closed, a new chapter opened, one of open collaboration and shared futures. Jake and Leah, once just astronomer and alien, now stood together as partners in a much larger universe. As they got up to leave the park, Leah stopped and looked back at the river, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. You know, Jake, she began, turning to face him with a knowing smile. I think this is the start of something wonderful. Jake, taking her hand in his, felt the weight of her words. It is. Together, we'll teach both our peoples what it means to look beyond the stars, to see not just lights in the sky, but hearts and minds across the cosmos. And with that, they walked back into the city, their steps light, their hearts full, ready to face whatever challenges and joys lay ahead.